Good morning, everybody. I'm going to tell you something about Public Health England first and whereabouts our Chief Executive Officer fits in, particularly about diversity and inclusion. So Duncan Selby is our Chief Executive and he's passionate about diversity and inclusion. That makes everything easier for us. So a couple of 3 years ago, he was in the House of Lords with Lord Patel having tea, as you do. And he was with our head of HR at the time, someone called Tony Vickers-Burton. And they were talking about how they can get diversity inclusion sorted out in a civil service body that, as its heart, public health is we want to show somehow that we do what we say. And one of the key things that you find in statistics is that if you're in work, you tend to be healthier. And so that was a theme that was coming up, was about being in work. Anyway, Duncan spoke with Lord Patel, and one of the things that Lord Patel was keen about was about children, young adults between the ages of 18 and 24 who had learning disabilities and or autism. And he was working at Bradford Hospital and they'd introduced this new thing called Project Search. And it's that I'm going to spend most of my time talking about. But going back to Duncan, Duncan is passionate about diversity and inclusion. So much so that he took his head of HR in a recent look at what we do in HR and made him a special advisor about diversity and inclusion, and put on top of that as well the role of looking at staff health and well-being, because all of those things are quite closely linked. He put this new unit together, which, looking at different acronyms, as Paul said, most of us called this the dishwashing unit because it's got diversity, inclusion and welfare and health, and you put them all together, it's a strange acronym. But the idea is that we've got to make diversity and inclusion part of our body's health and well-being. Public Health England have set about doing all the various networks. We've got networks for all the ones that were said, all the 10. They're there in various things, from old people to young people to neurodiversity, everything there. And we have champions in each of those. And those champions do a lot of the work in their own time. So part of the push forward from Duncan and getting Tony in position was to start to put teeth in it. So he employed a manager, a program manager, that would look after bringing all these networks together. He employed somebody also to then come in and look at all the different types of program to work that could benefit not just public health, but the people coming in. So we're looking very much at movement to work. We're looking ambitious about autism and how we can bring people in. We're talking with the Ministry of Defence and the Ministry of Justice about getting in other ex-offenders or those who have been through a military background who are really suffering from the things that they have seen. These are programs that are taking quite a while to get into place, but they're moving into a thing about public health, getting people back to work. That's what Duncan is doing. And Duncan makes it easier for everyone by being that champion, by making sure that everyone in his team is keen about those particular areas. Project Search was something that I think I fell into. My boss, Gwyn, was seconded to a post in Wales. And Project Search came about. Gwyn wasn't around, so it was me. I was told, we've got this project we want you to get involved with. This is what it's all about. I didn't know until that 2 years ago. I never heard of Project Search. And I'm sure a lot of people still haven't. It's American, so quite often we just switch off because it's American. Project Search was set up in a hospital in Cincinnati, and it was set up by the head nurse there with an educationalist. They worked on the principle that they were having lots of people coming into the hospital who had learning disabilities or had autism, neurological issues, and they were being looked after physically as part of the hospital. But when that was sorted out, what happened to them? So they started to work and actually looking at, with educational, how they could come up with a program to get these young people into a place where they could work. And we heard one of the facts earlier today about the difficulties a lot of our businesses have is about that young people aren't ready for work. And it's amplified if you've got a learning disability, if you're on that autistic spectrum, because things are difficult. Things aren't as straightforward as most people think. So Project Search is quite simply an immersion of a student into a host business where they get education, but also as well they get shown how an organisation works in a sort of protective way, but also in a very, very practical way. So we have the events where we pick which are the students going forward, and we're now into our second year with 10 students each year. The statistic is, if you're 18 to 24 in this group, likelihood of getting a job is about 10%. With Project Search, that changes to about 70%. So it's a huge thing to go for, and a huge target for us to go for. How it's set up is that you have rotations, 10-week blocks, where the students are immersed in a particular area of the business. Every morning they come in at 9 o'clock, they have an hour where there's a classroom element. And that classroom element is linked into what you need to know about work. And then in the afternoon, between 3 and 3:30, they have a time where they download, where they can talk to people about any of the issues, where they can get ready to go home. So they have these 3 10-week blocks. During those rotations, they're in a proper job. So all those in the civil service will know we have to go through mandatory training. And those mandatory training is everything from, particularly in Public Health England, we have Dementia Friends, we have diversity and inclusion, we have environmental, we have a whole package on health and safety, My Health, My Safety. We have all the different ones with fire awareness. Each one of the students, because they're at that time as civil servants, have to go through those. But of course, if you've got some of these problems about learning disability, you need support to do that. And that's why we have, as part of the programme, partnership. So Public Health England is the business. The partnership is our local council, Barnet Council. They're the ones where the money comes down from. We have as our educationalists, we have Barnet and Southgate College. We have as our employment supporters, and this one is quite unusual for most people, is Tottenham Hotspur Foundation. They provide the job coaches. And then we have West London Alliance, which provides some of the support that goes around all that. And then finally, as one of our steering group members, we have Barnet MenCap. With the tutors and with the job coaches, we take these individuals through different jobs that are around. We're part of operations. We have quite a diverse area. So we're mostly laboratories. Public Health England on the whole has a wide spectrum. But for some reason, because we probably put our head above the parapet, it's the National Infection Service that is running this. It's not about well-being, it's National Infection Service. So we have all the laboratories. One of the areas where a lot of our students work is our media department. And everyone thinks, oh, they're doing photography and all that. Our media is microbiology media. It's production of agar plates or bottles of broth or different solutions. So it's a manufacturing area. And in it we do sterilisation. And if you start to think of some of those jobs, sterilisation is what they do in hospitals. Production is what they do and a whole variety of places. We also have a warehouse. Everybody has a warehouse in big organisations. The people start to learn the skills that are in those areas and learn what it's like to be in work. At the end of it, they graduate. We as Public Health England can't give away jobs. We're like any other public body. So if we've got any jobs going, we have to put it out there for the open market. Last year, I put out 4 jobs, 1 in media, 1 in administration, 1 in our warehouse department, and 1 that was in one of our national external quality assurance laboratories. Open competition, they are now filled with 4 project search students that previously wouldn't have got jobs at all. That's great for those students, but what about the workforce? How does it affect them? The thing that we've noticed most is that the people working close with them in operations get a really good sense of well-being. They find it amazing when all of a sudden these children, as they see it, because most of them are older, but these young people, they really feel a thrill when they've got through a task over and over again, they get it right. We don't often see that in our own workforce. What's more is they're cheery. They come up in the morning and they'll say to one of our directors, "Hello, sunshine." Or when Duncan goes across, there'll be one hand goes up, "Hello, Duncan." It's something that makes you smile. But also as well, people start to see some of the disabilities, some of the problems that these students have. Relatives have got them, or people that they work with. And all of a sudden they're starting to learn new ways of doing things. And they're starting to see, well, actually, my cousin's got that, or actually my grandchild, they do that. And they're starting to learn more about diversity and inclusion, learning how to do things differently. The last thing I want to tell you about is we got fed back one day when we were having breakfast, Gwyn and I. A senior member of staff came back, and his wife is one of our deputy directors, but he's a senior scientist as well. And he'd had a taxi to take him to the airport. And as taxi drivers do, they where do you work, etc. And he said, "I work in Public Health England." The next half an hour, that taxi driver said, "Public Health England has turned my life around. I have a son who's come along, he's been in project search, he's now got a job. And it's just made so much difference to my wife and I having a son who can work." The message that came back was about vicarious glory. It was the fact that all of a sudden that person felt really good at being Public Health England because we'd done something. Our remit is about public health, and we've done something real. And that's what Project Search is all about. It's not for every organisation, but Project Search is in a whole load of places. And the call that I always say is, when you're going to advertise a job, maybe you can think, could there be something in Project Search or one of these supported internships around the country that deal with learning disabilities that I could tap into? Because those people are a resource that actually make our organisation and make our company feel better.